It was the smell that caught my attention first. That faint, dry scent of paper that hasn't been touched in decades. I'd been working in the university archives for almost 7 years, sorting through everything from student yearbooks to wartime correspondence. But this was different. The box was shoved into the very back of the bottom shelf, almost as if someone had tried to hide it. Its label read, in smudged typewriter ink, Greyditch, 1954. A strip of yellowed tape sealed the lid, and across it, in red block letters, someone had stamped, "Do not open without permission." I ran my fingers over the cardboard. It was brittle, fragile, like one wrong move and it would crumble. Something inside shifted with a dull, muted sound, like paper sliding against paper. I shouldn't have opened it. We had rules about that. But in archives, rules exist to protect history, and sometimes, history needs to be disturbed. The tape peeled away slowly, tearing in uneven strips. Inside, I found several manila folders, their edges curled, the paper inside them an uneven brown. There was also a smaller box, no bigger than a shoebox, wrapped in a thin layer of wax paper. A handwritten note sat on top of it. Greyditch incident, master copy, returned to archives 1968. No further investigation recommended. The word recommended was underlined twice. I had never heard of Greyditch. It wasn't in our public records index. No history department lectures. No student research papers. Just this box, sealed away for God knows how long. As I carried it over to my desk, the wax paper-wrapped box inside gave off the faintest sound. Not a rattle, not a shake, but something that almost sounded like a faint click. The first folder inside the Greyditch box was labeled Official Reports, March 1954. Inside there were typewritten police statements, a few photocopied newspaper clippings, and one telegram. The telegram was short, urgent. To Greyditch Police Department, from County Commissioner's Office. Multiple reports of public disturbance, all communications failing. Confirm situation immediately. The date, March 2nd, 1954. The timestamp, 09:29 a.m. A yellowed newspaper clipping caught my eye. The headline read, "Entire town stricken silent, authorities baffled." The article described how, at exactly 09:17 a.m., the people of Greyditch stopped speaking. Not gradually, not over the course of hours, but all at once, as if something had flipped a switch. Shopkeepers froze mid-sentence. Children stopped mid-laugh. Even the dogs and birds went quiet. The police report was chilling in its matter-of-fact tone. At 09:20 a.m., officers Linton and Hayes entered the town square. The area was filled with citizens standing in groups, unmoving. No one acknowledged their presence. Efforts to engage verbally yielded no response. It went on to note that the silence wasn't absolute. The wind still rustled through the trees. The fountain in the square still splashed water. But the absence of human sound created an unnatural, heavy stillness. The report closed with a single unsettling observation. Subjects appeared conscious. Eyes followed movement. Expression remained neutral. No attempt at communication was made. As I read, I felt my throat go dry. Whatever happened in Greyditch didn't just quiet the town. It erased something fundamental from it. Greyditch, in 1954, was barely more than a dot on the map. Population, 1,142. One main street, a handful of side roads, and a stone clock tower rising from the center of the town square. The tower's chime had been programmed since 1928 to ring every morning at exactly 9:17, the very moment the townspeople would later fall silent. The black and white photographs I found in the archives showed a place both peaceful and isolated. A small fountain in the square, the local grocery store, narrow sidewalks with tufts of grass pushing up between the stones. Everything seemed to be holding on against the slow decay of time. But buried in the local newspaper archives, small, odd stories caught my eye in the weeks leading up to the event. One article described how the postman noticed letters going missing from his satchel. Another mentioned that, at midnight, the clock tower's bell rang only once, followed by an unusually long chorus of howling dogs. From the outside, Greyditch looked like any other mid-century American town. But from within, it felt closed off. Outsiders rarely visited. There was a train station, but passenger service ran less than once a week. One witness account from the morning of the incident stayed with me. The air was thick with fog that day. It felt like even sound itself got lost in it. As I passed through the square, I saw people talking. Then, all at once, silence. Only the fountain remained. No one looked at each other, but it was as if we had all heard something. Greyditch wasn't just isolated in space, it was isolated in time. And that isolation, I suspected, was part of what allowed what happened next. One of the more unusual items in the Greyditch file was a spool of quarter-inch magnetic tape, carefully labeled Radio Station WGRD, March 2nd, 1954. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, and slightly faded. According to a memo paperclipped to the reel, the station's morning host, Arthur Kell, had been mid-broadcast when it happened. His final recorded words before the silence were, "And now, folks, a quick word from..." The voice cuts off abruptly. For the next 12 minutes, the recording captured nothing but the sound of the wind. Not static, just a thin, airy hiss, punctuated every few seconds by a faint click. The pattern was irregular at first, then became perfectly rhythmic. Click, click, click. Investigators initially assumed the sound was mechanical, maybe a loose gear in the recording equipment. But when a second reel from a different recorder was reviewed, the clicking was there too. Same rhythm, same pitch. What unsettled me most was the point, 8 minutes in, where the wind fades almost entirely and a low hum begins. It's barely audible, but it swells slowly, as though something were drawing closer to the microphone. Then, just as suddenly, it stops. At the very end of the tape, there's a strange, almost organic noise, a soft exhale, right next to the mic, before the reel abruptly ends. The memo from the county police chief ends with a handwritten note. "This is not a malfunction. Do not play publicly." The first personal account in the Greyditch file came from a farmer named Samuel Rowe. His handwritten statement, dated March 3rd, 1954, was shaky but legible, as if written by someone still unsettled. "I was feeding the hens that morning. They were noisy as usual, pecking, clucking, flapping their wings. The dogs were barking at nothing in particular. And then, it all stopped. Every sound. Not a gradual quieting. It was like someone had pulled a plug on the whole world." Rowe claimed the silence hit him so hard, he actually dropped the tin of feed he was holding. The chickens froze in place, their heads turning toward the same spot, the open gate leading out to the empty road. Their eyes, I'd never seen them like that. It wasn't fear, it wasn't calm, it was something in between. And the dogs, they didn't growl, didn't whine, just stared. When he stepped into the road, he saw his neighbors standing in their yards. Each one was facing a different direction, but all had the same expression. Eyes focused, lips pressed together, bodies still. I called out to Martha Jenkins across the way. No answer. I waved my arms. Nothing. But when I moved, their eyes followed me. All of them. It was like they were watching but not really seeing. The statement ends with Rowe saying he went back inside and locked the door. He didn't leave his house again until the next day. At the bottom of the page, in a different handwriting, possibly a police note, was a single sentence. Mr. Rowe died 3 weeks later. Cause: Heart failure. The Greyditch Town Hall was a modest two-story brick building, the kind you'd expect to host quilting bees and county fairs. But on the evening of March 3rd, 1954, it was filled with a strange, expectant stillness. The official record of the meeting, a single, nearly blank page, was included in the file. The date and emergency session were typed at the top, but below it, only 2 words appeared: no discussion. Witness accounts, however, painted a more unsettling picture. According to one resident, the mayor and 6 council members sat at the long wooden table at the front of the room. They didn't speak. They didn't shuffle papers. They didn't even blink much. The audience, about 20 townspeople, sat in silence as well. No one fidgeted or whispered. The only sound in the room was the faint hum of the overhead lights. Every so often, the mayor would glance to his left, as though waiting for someone to speak, but no one ever did. At one point, the town clerk, Mrs. Reed, opened her leather-bound ledger, dipped her pen into the inkwell, and then closed it again without writing a single word. The meeting lasted exactly 19 minutes. At the end, the mayor stood, nodded once to the room, and everyone left without a word. On the back of the meeting record, in faint pencil, someone had written, "They weren't waiting for each other. They were waiting for something else." In the days following the silence, a few residents of Greyditch attempted to leave town. Their accounts were some of the most disturbing in the file. One statement, from a traveling salesman named Walter Hensley, described how he packed his suitcase on the morning of March 5th and drove toward the highway. As he passed through the outskirts, he noticed something odd. The road seemed longer. I've driven that stretch hundreds of times. It's about 6 miles to the junction, but that day, it just kept going. The trees were the same, the curves in the road were the same, but the miles never added up. I checked my watch. 40 minutes had passed, and I still hadn't reached the junction. Eventually, Hensley turned back, only to find himself driving into Greyditch from the opposite direction, as if the road had looped on itself. Another account came from a young couple, the Whitakers, who left on foot, hiking across the fields toward the nearest neighboring town. They claimed that the fog thickened as they walked, until visibility was less than 10 feet. Then, without warning, they found themselves standing in front of the Greyditch Town Hall, the same spot they had left hours before. We didn't turn around. We didn't walk in circles. It was like the ground itself moved under us, Mrs. Whitaker wrote. Each of these testimonies was filed with a short note in the margin, "Verify if possible." None of them were. It seemed that once Greyditch fell silent, it wasn't just cut off from the world was cut off from it. The most haunting file in the Greyditch archive was a single-page report marked "Child Disappearance, Urgent." It was dated March 6th, 1954, just 4 days after the silence began. The report concerned a boy named Daniel Pike, age 7. His mother claimed she had been watching him play in their backyard when she turned away briefly to bring in laundry. When she came back, Daniel was gone. Neighbors joined the search within minutes. The boy's footprints led across the yard, through the garden, and into the open field behind their house. But halfway across the field, the tracks simply stopped. No signs of struggle, no other prints, just empty grass. One witness, a teenage neighbor, later told police, "I thought I saw him, but it was like looking through heat waves. He was there, then he shimmered, and then he was gone." The search continued through the night. Volunteers lit lanterns and combed the fields, but the fog seemed to swallow the light. By dawn, there was no sign of the boy. In the margin of the report, someone had written in pencil, "Sound of breathing reported near searchers at 2:14 a.m. No source found." Daniel Pike's disappearance was never officially explained. His name does not appear on any regional missing persons registry. In fact, outside of this file, it's as though he never existed at all. The last line of the police report, typed neatly at the bottom, read, "Recommend closure, no further action." The last dated entry in the Greyditch archive was March 9, 1954. It came in the form of a short field note from Deputy Harold Mills, who had been stationed on the edge of town. At 06:45 a.m., visibility low, town square empty, no movement from any residents, ambient sound, none. He wrote that he attempted to patrol the main street, but the silence seemed heavier than before. Even his own footsteps sounded muted, as though the air itself was swallowing them. At 07:12 a.m., Mills reported seeing a group of townspeople gathered near the clock tower. They were standing perfectly still, heads tilted upward, eyes fixed on the clock face. They were all breathing in unison, the note read, slow, steady, like they were following some kind of signal. When the clock struck 9:17, the chimes rang, but not the usual bright peal. Instead, each toll was muffled, almost dampened, like the sound was being heard from underwater. The townspeople didn't react at all. Mills wrote that a thick fog rolled in from all directions, swallowing the square within minutes. He tried to move closer, but every step forward seemed to make the people blur, their shapes dissolving into the mist. The last line in his report read, "I don't think they're people anymore." After that, there were no more entries, no more reports, no more photographs. The last folder in the Greyditch archive was marked simply with a red stamp, sealed, "Do not reopen." Inside were only two items, a blank sheet of paper and a photograph. The photograph showed the town square, shrouded in thick fog, the clock tower barely visible. No people, no movement, no sign of life. The edges of the image were warped, as if heat had touched the film. A small note was taped to the back of the photograph. It was handwritten in a hurried scrawl. "If you can read this, you were never meant to see it." The blank sheet of paper, at first, seemed like nothing. But under a black light, faint lines appeared. Coordinates, dated March 10, 1954. When I checked them, they pointed to an empty patch of farmland where Greyditch just could have been. No buildings, no roads, no trace of the town. The official closure notice from the state archives listed the file as incomplete, missing primary documentation. No explanation was given for why so much of the record was gone, or why the town no longer appeared on any current maps. The archivist who handed me the file only said one thing as I was leaving. "We don't like to talk about Greyditch, and you shouldn't either."